Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. Today, we are going to be taking a look at atheism around the world.
Okay.
And we're going to be looking at it through the lens of this article called How Many Atheists Are There in the World?
Sounds good.
And, I think that this is something that can be a little bit oversimplified.
Right.
When we talk about it.
Yeah.
So we are going to try and unpack some of those nuances, and hopefully we'll uncover some surprises along the way.
For sure.
So, for instance, did you know that China might have more atheists than the entire population of the United States?
It's a striking statistic, isn't it? And it really shows us that we have to look beyond simple labels when we talk about belief systems.
Okay, so let's start with that surprising fact about China.
Sure.
The source mentions a range of 660 to 850 million self-identified atheists.
Wow.
In China, which is just massive. What factors led to such a significant atheist population there?
Well, China's history over the past century is key. The rise of communism, with its emphasis on secularism and materialist philosophy, played a substantial role in shifting the religious landscape. The Cultural Revolution, in particular, saw a suppression of religious practices and institutions.
So this wasn't just a gradual cultural shift.
Right.
There were active policies that impacted people's beliefs.
Absolutely. But even within this context, it's important to remember that labeling someone as atheist in China doesn't always paint the full picture.
Okay.
Many Chinese people, while not adhering to organized religions, still practice what are known as folk religions or engage in traditions like ancestor veneration.
Can you expand on what folk religion means in this context?
Sure.
I think it might be a new term for some of our listeners.
Of course, folk religions in China encompass a wide array of beliefs and practices that often blend elements of Buddhism, Taoism, and local traditions.
Interesting.
They may involve rituals related to nature spirits, ancestor worship, or seeking good fortune. It's a very localized and personalized form of spirituality that exists alongside or sometimes interwoven with officially recognized religions.
That's a fascinating distinction, and one that really highlights the diversity even within a label like atheism.
Yeah.
It reminds us that we can't just assume everyone under a single label shares the exact same worldview.
Exactly. And this nuance becomes even more apparent when we zoom out from China to the global landscape of non-belief.
Right, so let's do that. The source estimates that around 15 to 20% of people worldwide identify as non-religious.
Mm-hmm.
But within that group, only a smaller percentage specifically call themselves atheists, right?
That's correct. Of those who identify as non-religious, approximately 7 and 9% identify as atheist. This translates to roughly 700 million to 1 billion atheists globally.
Wow, even that smaller percentage represents a huge population. It really challenges the perception that religious belief is a universal human experience.
It does. And it's worth noting that these are just estimates based on available data, which can vary in accuracy depending on the country and its cultural context. The reality is likely even more complex and fluid than these numbers suggest.
So we've established that atheism is a significant global phenomenon. But the source doesn't stop at just numbers. It also goes on to highlight the importance of respect between theists and atheists. Why do you think that message is so central to this discussion?
I think it speaks to a deeper issue that often surfaces when we discuss topics like belief and non-belief. There's a tendency to frame these conversations as a battle between opposing sides, with each trying to prove the other wrong. This approach can lead to polarization and a lack of understanding.
It becomes more about winning an argument than genuinely trying to understand different perspectives.
Precisely. And that's where the source's emphasis on respect comes in. It's a call to move beyond this adversarial dynamic and engage in a more open and empathetic dialogue.
Which, if we're being honest, is often much harder to do than it sounds.
It definitely is. It requires a willingness to step outside of our own firmly held beliefs and genuinely try to see the world through the eyes of someone who holds different views.
And the source is saying that this applies to both sides of the equation.
Yeah.
Right? It's not just about theists being more understanding of atheists, but also the other way around.
Absolutely. The source reminds those who believe in a God to see atheists not as a threat, but as people who value critical thinking and skepticism. It encourages atheists to appreciate the role faith plays in the lives of billions, acknowledging its influence on art, architecture, and acts of compassion. It's about recognizing the diversity of human experience.
So instead of focusing on our differences, maybe the key takeaway is that we're all ultimately seeking meaning and purpose, even if our paths look very different.
I think that's a great way to put it. And that brings us to this really interesting point that the source raises, which is this idea that none of us, regardless of our beliefs, really know whether or not a higher power exists.
It's almost like a reminder of the inherent mystery, That underlies all of our attempts to make sense of the world.
It is. And, I think that's something we often lose sight of when we get so caught up in debates about who's right or wrong.
Right.
The source suggests that maybe arguing about the existence or non-existence of God is less important than recognizing that we're all just grappling with the same profound questions about existence, purpose, and the nature of reality.
So instead of viewing those with different beliefs as opponents to be defeated, we could see them as fellow travelers on this journey of exploration and discovery.
Exactly. And that shift in perspective can have a profound impact on how we approach these conversations. It allows for more humility, more curiosity, and more space for genuine understanding.
It's like we're all standing on the edge of this vast, uncharted territory, trying to make sense of what we see. And maybe the most valuable thing we can do is share our observations, our insights, and our uncertainties with each other.
That's a beautiful analogy. And it speaks to the heart of what the source is trying to convey. It's not about erasing our differences or pretending that everyone has to agree on everything. It's about recognizing that those differences are part of what makes the human experience so rich and complex.
So how do we put this into practice?
Yeah.
How do we move away from those divisive arguments and create space for more respectful and meaningful dialogue about these big questions?
Well, I think it starts with a willingness to listen.
Yeah.
Not just to hear the words someone is saying, but to really try to understand the underlying beliefs, values, and experiences that shape their perspective. It also involves being open to the possibility that we might learn something new.
Right.
Even if it challenges our own preconceived notions.
So it's about approaching these conversations with a spirit of genuine inquiry.
Yeah.
Rather than trying to impose our own beliefs on others.
Precisely. And when we do that, we open ourselves up to the possibility of genuine connection, even across differences in belief.
The source doesn't shy away from tackling some potentially controversial topics.
Right.
Like the philosophical arguments for and against the existence of God.
Right.
Can we touch on that a bit? I think it'd be helpful for our listener to get a glimpse of that landscape.
Absolutely. Throughout history, brilliant minds have grappled with this fundamental question, offering a range of arguments.
Okay.
For instance, the cosmological argument posits that the universe must have a first cause, a creator. On the other hand, you have arguments like the problem of evil, which questions how an all-powerful, all-loving God could allow suffering to exist. Then there's the argument from design, which points to the apparent order and complexity in the universe as evidence of a designer.
And I imagine each of these arguments has counter-arguments and branches into deeper philosophical discussions.
Exactly. It's a vast and fascinating field of inquiry. And while we can't delve into the intricacies of each argument here,
Sure.
I think what's important for the listener is to understand that these debates have been going on for centuries, and there are no easy answers.
So rather than getting bogged down in trying to win these arguments, maybe the more valuable approach is to simply engage with them thoughtfully and respectfully.
I think that's a wise approach. These philosophical explorations can enrich our understanding of the world and our place in it, even if they don't lead to definitive conclusions.
And that brings us to another point that really struck me in the source.
Okay.
This idea that faith can be a source of meaning and community for billions of people. While atheism, rooted in critical thinking and skepticism, can also provide a framework for navigating life's complexities.
It's a powerful reminder that different paths can lead to fulfilling and meaningful lives, and that judging the validity of someone's worldview solely based on whether or not it aligns with our own is a recipe for division and misunderstanding.
So it's not about saying one path is inherently better than the other, but rather recognizing that each path offers its own unique set of values, perspectives, and contributions to the human experience.
Exactly. And perhaps that recognition is a more profound and unifying belief than any other.
I love that thought. It reminds me of the Source's powerful closing line. We're all in this together, and that's something to believe in.
Yeah.
Whether you find meaning in a higher power, in human connection, in scientific discovery, or in something else entirely, that shared experience of being human is something we can all hold on to.
It really is. And it brings us back to this idea of embracing this kaleidoscope of human beliefs.
As we've been talking, I've been thinking about how this whole discussion kind of ties back to our own lives and interactions.
Right.
It's easy to get caught up in abstract debates, but how can we actually apply these insights to the way we interact with people who hold different beliefs than our own?
That's such an important question. I think it starts with recognizing that Respectful dialogue isn't about trying to convert someone to our way of thinking or proving them wrong. It's about creating a space where we can share our perspectives, listen to each other's stories, and maybe even find some common ground amidst our differences.
So instead of going into those conversations with our defenses up, ready to argue, we should try to approach them with a sense of curiosity and a genuine desire to understand where the other person is coming from.
Exactly. And that requires a willingness to be vulnerable, to admit that we don't have all the answers, and to be open to the possibility that our own beliefs might be challenged or even changed through the process.
That can be kind of scary, can't it?
Yeah.
I mean, we build our beliefs on what we think is a solid foundation, and it can be really unsettling to have that foundation shaken.
It absolutely can be. But I think that's where the real growth happens,
Right.
When we allow ourselves to be challenged, to question our assumptions, and to consider different perspectives, we expand our understanding of the world and of ourselves.
So discomfort can actually be a sign that we're on the right track, that we're engaging in a meaningful way with these big questions.
I think so. And who knows, maybe through these open and honest conversations, we might even discover that we have more in common with those who hold different beliefs than we initially thought.
I love that. It's like that saying, the opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the opposite of understanding is not disagreement, it's apathy.
Right.
As long as we're engaging with each other, even if it's through disagreement, we're still acknowledging each other's humanity and the validity of our respective journeys.
Beautifully put. And that brings us back to the source's powerful message. We're all in this together. It's a reminder that despite our varied beliefs and perspectives, we're all part of this grand, messy, beautiful tapestry of human existence. And perhaps embracing that shared humanity is a more profound and unifying belief than any other.
That's a wonderful note to end on. So to our listeners, we hope this deep dive into global atheism has given you some new insights and perhaps even inspired you to engage in more meaningful conversations with those around you. Remember, the world is full of fascinating perspectives, and listening to those perspectives with an open mind and an open heart can lead to incredible growth and connection. Keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep the conversation going.